My stepmother and my father demanded that I give them the house I inherited from my late mother, so I kicked them out. You know, sometimes I wonder if people can feel when something is about to change forever. 8 years ago, when Mom died, I was only 18 years old, and the world collapsed on me. Dad was devastated, and I tried to be strong for both of us. The house she loved so much, where she painted her pictures in the living room and tended to the garden with such care, suddenly felt too empty. Mom had left the property to me in her will, a decision that seemed strange to me at the time, but which she explained as a gesture of love and protection. "One day you'll understand. My daughter," she said in her final days. And today, at 26 years old, I understand perfectly. 3 years after Mom's death, Dad met Sandra. She was different from Mom in every way. Where Mom was gentle and quiet, Sandra was assertive and spoke loudly. She had 2 daughters, Jessica age 19 and Amanda age 16, and Dad seemed genuinely happy again. I wanted him to be happy, so I opened my heart and my house to them. At first, Sandra was even affectionate with me. She said I was like a daughter to her, that we would finally have a complete family. Her daughters were shy but polite. Jessica was studying business administration, and Amanda was still in high school. We seemed like a normal family, having dinner together, watching movies on weekends. But things began to change subtly. First came small comments. "This house is too big for one person," or "Your mother had very peculiar tastes." Then came suggestions for changes. "How about we renovate the kitchen? It's so outdated." Always speaking in the plural, as if it were a collective decision. I worked as an administrative assistant at an accounting firm, earning enough to support myself, but not enough for major renovations. Sandra, on the other hand, had her own craft business that seemed to do well. She began paying for small repairs and improvements to the house, always saying it was our contribution to the home. The first time I was really bothered was when I came home from work and found the living room furniture rearranged. "It looks much better this way, don't you think?" Sandra asked, as if it were obvious. Mom's sofa, where she used to read, was turned toward the wall. I didn't say anything that day, but I felt something contract in my chest. Dad seemed not to notice the changes, or perhaps chose not to see them. He was working a lot, trying to retire early, and when he came home, he just wanted peace. "Women handle these things better than I do," he would say, shrugging. Then came the issue of Mom's room. I kept everything as she had left it. Her jewelry on the dresser, books on the bedside table, unfinished paintings on the easel. It was my sanctuary, the place where I could still feel her presence. Sandra began to hint that it was morbid to keep everything like that. "You need to move on, dear," she would say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your mother wouldn't want to see you stuck in the past." But I wasn't stuck in the past. I was honoring the memory of the woman who raised me, who taught me that our house was more than brick and cement. It was where we kept our dreams and memories. Sandra didn't understand this, or perhaps understood it all too well. Things escalated when she began using Mom's studio for her craft projects. She came home one day with boxes of materials and began installing her things. "This space was being wasted," she explained when I protested. "Your mother would like it to be used for something productive." I felt anger for the first time since she had arrived. How did she know what Mom would like? How dare she speak on behalf of a woman she had never met? But when I tried to talk to Dad, he said Sandra was being practical and that I should be grateful for her taking care of the house. Grateful. The word echoed in my mind for days. Grateful for someone taking over my own inheritance? Grateful for having my spaces invaded, my memories questioned, my authority subtly challenged every day? That's when I realized Sandra wasn't just settling into our house. She was establishing herself as the new owner, and I was being gradually relegated to the role of tenant in my own property. Her smile when she rearranged my belongings, the way she talked about our decisions, how she treated each room as if it were hers by right. That night, lying in my bed, looking at the ceiling that should one day be mine by right, and now seemed to be slipping from my hands, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this happen. Mom had left me this house for a reason, and I was going to figure out how to protect what was mine. I had no idea I was just at the beginning of a battle that would test not only my determination, but reveal the true character of the people around me. Some surprises would be painful, others would give me strength I didn't even know I possessed. The control Sandra thought she had over my house and my life was about to be challenged, and I was ready to fight. In the following months, Sandra's behavior became increasingly bold. She began imposing rules as if she were really the owner of the house. "I don't want any more visits after 9 at night," she announced during dinner, looking directly at me. "This is a family home, not a hotel." My best friend Carol had just arrived from work and wanted to talk about a personal problem. It was only 8:30, but Sandra made a point of appearing in the living room with a disapproving expression. "I think it's getting late, isn't it?" she said, crossing her arms. Carol looked at me confused, and I felt my face burn with shame. "It's okay," I said quietly. "We'll talk tomorrow." After Carol left, Sandra smiled at me. "You understand, right? We need to keep the house organized and respectable. Your friends are welcome, but within appropriate hours." appropriate hours. In my own house. The situation worsened when she began messing with my personal belongings. I had a bookshelf with books and objects of sentimental value in my room. One day, I came home from work and found everything reorganized. It was a mess, she explained casually. I cleaned it up for you. Among the objects was a small vase that Mom made in a pottery class. It wasn't beautiful. It had imperfections, but she was so proud when she brought it home. My first work of art, she joked. Sandra had placed it at the back of the shelf, almost hidden. That little vase was taking up too much space in front, she said when I questioned her. I put it in a more appropriate place. Appropriate for whom? For her? Who decided what was worthy of prominence in my own house? But what bothered me most were the cameras. Sandra installed a security system to protect the family, as she said. Cameras at the entrance, in the living room, in the kitchen. She showed the images on her phone, being able to see everything that happened even when she wasn't home. Technology is incredible nowadays, she commented, showing Dad how she could monitor everything remotely. Now I can be sure everything is okay even when I'm working. I felt watched all the time. I could no longer relax in my own living room, couldn't have friends over without feeling like I was being surveilled. The house that used to be my refuge became a high-tech prison. Jessica and Amanda seemed uncomfortable with their mother's behavior, but rarely spoke up. Sometimes I caught Jessica looking at me with a strange expression, as if she wanted to say something, but she always quickly looked away. Amanda, the youngest, even commented once. My mom is sometimes very intense. But when Sandra appeared, the conversation was immediately interrupted. The last straw came when Sandra decided that Mom's garden needed to be modernized. Mom had planted roses, lavender, and a small herb garden. It was simple, but she cared for each little plant with so much love. These plants are too disorganized, Sandra declared one Saturday morning. I'm going to hire a landscaper to do something more presentable. No, I said firmly. The garden stays as it is. Sandra looked at me with surprise. It was the first time I had confronted her directly. Dear, you don't understand gardening, she said with that condescending tone I was learning to hate. I have experience with these things. I'll make something beautiful. You'll see. I said no, I repeated, feeling my voice tremble. That garden was planted by my mother. Don't touch it. Sandra was silent for a moment, then smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had just accepted a challenge. Of course, dear, she said softly. We'll talk about this later. But I knew that for her, the conversation was already over. She was just deciding what her next move would be. That night, I heard Sandra talking to Dad in their room. The walls were thin, and although I couldn't hear everything, I caught some words. Ungrateful, difficult, doesn't respect the family. Dad murmured something back, but I couldn't understand what it was. The next morning, he approached me before I left for work. Daughter, Sandra is just trying to help, he said, avoiding my gaze. She cares about you, about all of us. Maybe you could be a little more flexible? Flexible. Another word that began to bother me deeply. Dad, this is my house, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Mom left me this house. I don't need to be flexible about things that are important to me. He sighed, suddenly looking older. Your mother would also want us to be a happy family. Sometimes compromises are necessary. Compromises. Flexibility. Pretty words to disguise the fact that I was being pressured to give up everything that was mine, everything that was important to me, to keep peace with a woman who seemed determined to erase any trace of my mother from this house. As I drove to work, one question hammered in my mind. How far was Sandra willing to go to get what she wanted? And more importantly, how far was I willing to go to protect what was mine? The answer to the first question came sooner than I expected. And when it came, it changed everything. The day that changed everything started like any other. It was a rainy Tuesday in October, and I was coming home from work early because I had canceled some meetings. I opened the front door and found the house strangely quiet. Normally, Sandra would be in the studio, Mom's former room, working on her projects, but I didn't hear any noise. I went upstairs to change clothes, and passing through the hallway, I noticed that the door to Mom's room was open. Not Sandra's makeshift studio, but the actual room, where I kept my mother's most precious things. My heart raced. I ran there and found Sandra standing in the middle of the room, with several cardboard boxes scattered on the floor. She was holding Mom's jewelry, including the engagement ring that Dad had given her, a delicate piece with a small but beautiful emerald. What are you doing? I asked, my voice coming out louder than I intended. Sandra turned calmly, as if she wasn't doing anything wrong. Oh, you're here. Good. I was organizing these old things. I thought it was time for you to get rid of them. Get rid of them? I repeated, incredulous. These are my mother's things. Exactly, she said, putting the ring in one of the boxes. Old things that are just collecting dust. It's not good for you to keep clinging to the past like this. I looked around the room and felt my world collapse. Mom's paintings, those she made on Sunday afternoons, simple portraits but full of love, were stacked in a box marked donation. The diaries she wrote, where she noted recipes, thoughts, and little verses, were in another box. "You can't do this," I said, approaching the boxes. "These things are mine." "Dear, you need to understand that keeping all this isn't healthy," Sandra continued with that tone of someone who believes they're doing a favor. "Your mother wouldn't want to see you living in the past. She would want you to move forward, build new bonds, new memories." I picked up one of Mom's diaries and pressed it against my chest. "You didn't know my mother. Don't talk as if you knew what she would want." "I know what any mother would want for her daughter," Sandra replied, crossing her arms. "And it's not to be trapped in a museum of sad memories." Sad memories. She had just called the only things left of my mother sad memories. "Get out of here," I said, feeling a fury I had never experienced before. "Get out of this room now." "I'm not leaving," Sandra responded, raising her voice for the first time. "Someone needs to help you grow up. Your father is worried about you, you know? He thinks you're too attached to these things." "My father said that?" I asked, feeling physical pain in my chest. "He worries because you can't form new emotional bonds," Sandra continued, now with a softer, more manipulative tone. "How are you going to find someone, get married, have children if you live glued to ghosts from the past?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw something that made me freeze. In her eyes, there was no compassion or genuine concern. There was satisfaction. She was enjoying seeing me suffer. "These things aren't going anywhere," I said, starting to take items out of the boxes. "And you're not coming back into this room." "Oh, I'm not," Sandra laughed. "Daughter, you forget that this house is as much mine as yours. I live here, take care of here, pay bills here. I have as much right as you do." "Right. As much right as me. In the house my mother left me." "This house is mine," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "My mother left me this house. It's in the will." "Wills can be contested," Sandra said casually, as if she were talking about the weather, "especially when the person who inherited doesn't have the conditions to maintain the property adequately." The threat was clear. She wasn't just invading my space, messing with my things, disrespecting my mother. She was planning to take my house. "You need to get out of here," I repeated. But my voice came out weaker this time. "No," Sandra said simply. "And you know why? Because your father is on my side. He knows I'm right. He knows you need to grow up." At that moment, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Dad appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "What's happening here?" he asked, looking at the boxes on the floor. "I was helping your daughter organize these old things," Sandra said, instantly changing to a sweet tone. "But she's being difficult." Dad looked at me, then at Sandra, then at the messy room. "Daughter, maybe it really is time to put away some of these things. It doesn't have to be all at once, but..." "But what?" I asked, feeling tears burn my eyes. "Dad, these are Mom's things. They're all that's left of her. Your mother isn't in these things," he said softly. "She's here," he touched his chest, "and here," he touched his forehead. "These are just objects. Just objects. The jewelry she wore, the paintings she made, the diaries where she wrote her hopes and fears. Just objects to the man who once promised to love her forever." "Get out," I said, my voice coming out strangely calm. "Both of you get out of this room." "Daughter," Dad began. "Get out," I screamed, surprising even myself. They left, but I could hear Sandra whispering something to Dad in the hallway. I could hear him murmuring back, and I could hear their footsteps moving away, leaving me alone with the scattered boxes and the painful realization that I was fighting this battle completely alone. I sat on the floor of Mom's room and cried like I hadn't cried since her funeral. But in the middle of the tears, an iron determination began to form in my chest. Sandra had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She had touched sacred things, irreplaceable memories, the essence of what remained of the woman who raised me. And for that, she was going to pay. But first, I needed help. I needed someone who understood laws, rights, how to protect what was mine. I needed a lawyer. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a determination I hadn't felt in years. I had spent the entire night reorganizing Mom's things, putting each precious item back in its place. But more importantly, I had spent hours researching lawyers specializing in real estate law and successions. I chose the office Miranda & Associates, which had good online reviews and was located downtown. I called as soon as they opened and got an appointment for that same afternoon. At work, I could barely concentrate. My boss, Mrs. Elena, noticed I was different. "Are you okay, dear? You seem tense today." "Just some personal problems," I replied, trying to focus on the spreadsheet in front of me. "If you need to leave early, no problem," she offered. Mrs. Elena had always been understanding, one of the few people who really cared about me. At 3 in the afternoon, I was sitting in the law office waiting room, nervous and still not entirely sure what to say. When the secretary called me, I was led to a room where a woman of about 45 years was waiting for me. "I'm Dr. Miranda," she said, extending her hand. "Pleasure to meet you. On the phone, you mentioned inheritance issues?" "Yes," I replied, sitting in the chair across from her. My mother passed away 8 years ago and left me our house. But now, the situation is complicated. I told her the whole story, from Sandra's arrival in our family to the events of the previous day. Dr. Miranda asked several questions, taking careful notes. "Did you bring the will?" she asked. "Yes," I said, handing over the copy I had kept all these years. "Here it is." She examined the document carefully. "Everything is in order. Your mother left the property entirely to you, with usufruct for your father while he lives. This means the house is yours, but your father has the right to live in it. And Sandra? Sandra has no rights over the property." "Doctor," Miranda said firmly, "she is just the wife of someone who has usufruct. That doesn't give her any rights over the property." I felt immense relief. So she can't contest the will? She can try, but it would be an unfounded action. She's not a necessary heir, didn't contribute to acquiring the property, and there's nothing in the will that gives her rights. Dr. Miranda leaned back in her chair. "Actually, you have the right to determine who can or cannot live in your property, while respecting your father's usufruct. Does this mean I can ask her to leave?" "Exactly. You can formally notify her and her daughters to leave the property. Your father can stay, but the other people need your authorization to live there." My heart raced. There was a way out. There was a legal way to get my house back. "How does this process work?" I asked. "First, we issue an extrajudicial notification, giving a deadline, usually 15 days, for her to vacate voluntarily. If she doesn't leave, we can file a repossession action. And if she tries to make it difficult, she can try, but the law is on your side. You have the property title, the will is valid, and she's irregularly occupying the property." Dr. Miranda explained the costs and deadlines. It wasn't cheap, but I had saved some money over the years, and I felt it was worth every penny to get my peace back. "There's one more thing," she said. "You mentioned she made improvements to the house. This can be used as an argument by her, but it actually works in your favor." "How so?" "Improvements made by someone who irregularly occupies the property generally don't give the right to compensation. Besides, if she spent money on renovations without your authorization, this can be considered damage to the patrimony." I felt I finally had a weapon in my fight. "Let's go ahead," I said. "I want her out of my house." "Very well. I'll prepare the notification today. You can pick it up tomorrow, and then just deliver it to her." I left the office with a sense of power I hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in months, I felt I had control over my own life. The way home had never seemed so liberating. Every corner I passed, every traffic light where I stopped, brought me closer to the moment when Sandra would discover that she had completely underestimated the naive girl she thought she could manipulate. When I got home, I found the house empty. There was a note from Dad in the kitchen. "We went to the mall, back for dinner." Perfect. I went up to Mom's room and sat in the armchair where she used to read. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I felt her presence clearly. "Mom," I whispered, "you were right to leave me this house. I'm going to protect it, I promise." When I opened my eyes, my gaze fell on one of Mom's paintings that Sandra had almost donated. It was a simple self-portrait, but the painted eyes seemed to look at me with pride. At that moment, I knew I wasn't fighting alone. I had my mother with me, and now I had the law on my side. Sandra had made her last move yesterday, even without knowing it. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I picked up the notification at Dr. Miranda's office. The document was formal and clear. Sandra Helena and her minor daughters, Jessica and Amanda, had 15 days to voluntarily vacate the property located at 247 Flores Street. The deadline would begin counting from the date of receipt of the notification. "Remember," Dr. Miranda instructed me, "deliver it personally to her and ask her to sign the receipt. If she refuses, you can leave it in the presence of witnesses." I returned home in the late afternoon. Sandra was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming softly as if nothing had happened the day before. Dad was in the living room watching the news, and the girls were in their rooms. "Sandra," I said, my voice firm, "I need to talk to you." She turned around, drying her hands on the dish towel. "Of course, dear. About yesterday. I hope you've thought about what we discussed." "I did think about it," I replied, taking the envelope from my purse. "And that's why I'm giving you this." Sandra took the envelope curiously. As she read, her expression changed completely, from usual arrogance to confusion, then to anger. "What is this?" she asked, her voice losing all the false sweetness. "It's a legal notification," I replied calmly. "You have 15 days to leave my house." "Your house?" Sandra laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "I've lived here for 5 years. I pay bills, take care of the house, made improvements. You think you can simply kick me out?" "I don't think. I know I can," I said, maintaining a firm tone. "This house is mine by inheritance right. You can check at the registry office if you want." Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway, attracted by the discussion. "What's happening here?" "Your daughter has gone crazy," Sandra said, waving the paper. "She thinks she can kick me out of my own house." "It's not your house," I corrected. "It never was. And Dad can stay, obviously." The notification is only for you and your daughters. Dad took the paper and read quickly. His face paled. Daughter, what is this? It's what I should have done a long time ago, I replied. Mom left me this house. You two, I looked at Sandra, will respect that or leave. You can't do this, Sandra said, her voice rising. We're a family. You can't separate a family. I didn't separate any family, I replied. You chose to disrespect my mother, invade my space, mess with my things. You forgot that this house has an owner. Jessica and Amanda appeared in the kitchen, attracted by the discussion. Sandra turned to them dramatically. Girls, did you hear? She wants to kick us out of our house. It's not our house, Mom, Jessica said quietly. We always knew the house was hers. Sandra looked at her older daughter as if she had been slapped. How can you say that? We built a home here. We did build one, Amanda said, surprising everyone. But on top of her pain, Mom, you messed with her mother's things yesterday. That wasn't right. I was helping, Sandra shouted. She needs to get over this sick obsession. The sick obsession is yours, I said, finally losing my patience. Your obsession with controlling everything, with owning what isn't yours, with erasing any trace of my mother from this house. Dad still held the paper, looking lost. Daughter, can't we talk about this? Find a solution that works for everyone? I tried to talk for 5 years, I replied, looking directly at him. I tried to be flexible, tried to make compromises. But yesterday she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. What line? Dad asked. She tried to throw away Mom's things, I said, my voice trembling. The jewelry, the paintings, the diaries, everything that was left of her. The silence that followed was heavy. Dad looked at Sandra with an expression I couldn't decipher. Sandra? He said quietly. I was trying to help, Sandra defended herself. But her voice lost conviction. She can't live in the past forever. Those things weren't yours to decide, Dad said. And for the first time in years, I heard firmness in his voice when addressing Sandra. So you're on her side? Sandra asked, incredulous. After everything I've done for this family? I'm on the side of what's right, Dad replied. And messing with Maria's things? That wasn't right. Sandra looked around the kitchen like a cornered animal. Very well, she said finally. Very well. You want me to leave? I'll leave, but not alone. She turned to Dad. You come with me or stay with your ungrateful daughter. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Dad looked at me, then at Sandra, then at the girls who watched everything in silence. Sandra? He began. It's a simple question, she interrupted him. Is your family her or us? It was an ultimatum. Sandra was forcing Dad to choose between his blood daughter and the new family he had built, and in her expression, I saw she was sure what his choice would be. It's not about choosing family, Dad said slowly. It's about doing what's right. And what's right for you? Sandra insisted. Dad looked at me for a long moment. I saw in that look years of guilt, attempts to please everyone, avoiding conflicts. But I also saw something that surprised me, regret. What's right, he said finally, is to recognize that this house belongs to my daughter, and that I shouldn't have let things get to this point. Sandra went pale. You're choosing her? I'm choosing the truth, Dad replied, and the truth is that this house is hers. It always was. For a moment, I thought Sandra was going to explode, but then she did something that surprised me. She smiled. It was a cold, calculating smile. Very well, she said calmly. Very well. But you don't know who you're messing with. She picked up the notification from the table and tore it in half. 15 days? We'll see about that. Before anyone could respond, Sandra left the kitchen stomping hard. We heard the bedroom door slam forcefully. Jessica approached me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. My mom sometimes, she doesn't know when to stop. We'll leave, Amanda added. We don't want to cause more problems. You didn't cause any problems, I said, feeling unexpected tenderness for both of them. You were always respectful to me. Dad was still standing in the middle of the kitchen, holding the pieces of the torn notification. Daughter, he said, I'm sorry for everything. I know, Dad, I replied. And somehow, I really knew. That night, the house was strangely quiet. Sandra didn't come down for dinner, and the girls ate quickly before retreating to their rooms. Dad and I had dinner in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Before sleeping, I called Dr. Miranda and told her what had happened. She tore the notification? The lawyer asked. That doesn't invalidate the document. Actually, it can be considered contempt. I'll prepare a second copy, and this time we'll file it with a court officer. She said we don't know who we're messing with, I told her. That worries me. Don't worry, Dr. Miranda reassured me. People who make that kind of threat are usually desperate. The law is on our side. But even so, as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sandra wasn't going to give up so easily. The cold smile she'd given before leaving the kitchen haunted me. She was planning something, and I had the impression that the next 15 days would be the most difficult of my life. The 15-day deadline turned into the most tense period I had ever lived through. Sandra completely changed her strategy. Instead of direct confrontations, she adopted a silent and relentless psychological warfare. First, she began working on Dad. I heard them talking quietly in their room until late hours. During the day, she bombarded him with arguments about family, loyalty, and ingratitude. After everything I've done for this house, for you, for her, she repeated like a mantra. Dad became visibly thinner during those 2 weeks. He looked at me with an expression of constant pain, as if he were being forced to choose between saving 2 people in a shipwreck. Daughter, he told me one morning, are you sure there's no other way? She's really bad about all this. Dad, she tried to throw away Mom's things, I reminded him. How do you expect me to forget that? He sighed deeply. I know. It's just that, 5 years together, she feels part of the family. She can continue being part of the family, I said, just not living in my house. But Sandra wasn't just working on Dad. She began spreading her version of the story to anyone who would listen. Neighbors, co-workers, even the supermarket clerk where we shopped. It's so sad, I heard her telling Mrs. Rosa, our elderly neighbor. The girl can't accept that her father rebuilt his life. She wants to kick me out of the house where I built my family. Mrs. Rosa looked at me with a disapproving expression when we crossed paths on the street. Daughter, she said, family is sacred. You don't break up a family over material issues. Material issues. As if the house my mother left me was just a material issue. Sandra's campaign was so effective that I began receiving strange looks at the supermarket, whispered comments at the bakery. She had managed to paint the situation as if I were a cruel daughter, expelling a mother from her home out of pure greed. But the worst was yet to come. On the 10th day of the deadline, I came home from work and found Dad in the living room with a somber expression. Daughter, we need to talk, he said. What happened? Sandra? She has a proposal. My stomach contracted. What kind of proposal? She wants to buy your part of the house. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Buy my part? Dad, the house is entirely mine. There's no part to sell. She knows that, Dad said quickly. But she's willing to pay a fair value for the entire property. You could buy a smaller apartment, have your independence, and let Sandra keep Mom's house? It's just a house. Daughter, your mother isn't in the walls. I looked at Dad, really looked, and saw a man I didn't recognize. The man who had loved my mother, who had cried at her funeral, who had promised to always protect her memory, was suggesting that I sell her house to the woman who had tried to erase all traces of her. How much? I asked, curious to know how far Sandra's audacity went. 200,000, Dad said, avoiding my gaze. The house was worth at least 400,000, and Sandra knew it. It was an insulting offer, clearly made to provoke me. And if I refuse? Dad hesitated. Sandra said that she can contest the will in court, that she made significant improvements to the house, that she contributed to its maintenance. She thinks she has rights. So that was it. The threat was finally on the table. Sandra wanted to buy the house for half the price, or else she would drag me into a legal battle that could last years. And you? I asked. What do you think I should do? Dad stopped, took a deep breath. I think it would be easier for everyone if you accepted the offer. Easier for everyone. Code for easier for me, who doesn't want to deal with conflict. Dad, I said calmly, do you remember what Mom said before she died? About why she was leaving the house to me? He didn't answer. She said I would need protection, that not everyone who says they love us really loves us, that I would need to have something that was only mine, that no one could take from me. Your mother was sick, Dad murmured. Sometimes she said things. She wasn't delirious, Dad. She was right. And you know it. At that moment, Sandra appeared in the living room doorway. She was smiling, but it was that frozen smile I had learned to fear. So? She asked. Did you think about my offer? I did think about it, I replied, standing up. And the answer is no. Sandra's smile failed for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Are you sure? It's a generous offer. Generous would be you leaving my house without me having to call the police. Oh, dear, Sandra said, her tone becoming dangerously sweet. Do you really think it's that simple? Yes, I replied. Very simple. Sandra looked at Dad, then back at me. We'll see, she said. We'll see indeed. The next day, when I came home from work, I found a court officer waiting for me at the door. He was delivering a court summons. Sandra had filed a reivindicatory action, claiming rights to half of the property. The war had officially begun. And for the first time since all this started, I felt afraid. But I also felt something else. An iron determination not to let Sandra destroy the last thing my mother had left me. She wanted a battle? Then she would have a battle. The court summons caught me completely off guard. Even knowing Sandra had threatened to contest the will, part of me still hoped she would give up when she realized I wasn't going to yield. I immediately called Dr. Miranda. Can they do this? Does she really have any chance of winning? Calm down, the lawyer reassured me. I read the initial petition you sent me. The arguments are weak, Basically, she claims common law marriage with your father and improvements made to the property. But common law marriage doesn't give automatic rights over previous private assets, and the improvements were made without the owner's authorization. But how long will it take to resolve? It could take 6 months to 2 years, depending on the jurisdiction. But we'll file a robust defense and request preliminary injunction to guarantee your possession. 2 years. Sandra could stay in my house for 2 more years, while justice decided on something that should be obvious. The house was mine. When I got home that night, the atmosphere was different. Sandra was no longer tense or aggressive. On the contrary, she seemed relaxed, almost triumphant. She hummed in the kitchen while preparing dinner, as if she hadn't just sued her stepdaughter. "Hi, dear," she said when she saw me. "How was work?" The forced normalcy of the situation was more disturbing than any confrontation. It was as if she knew something I didn't know. Dad was in the living room but avoided my gaze when I entered. Jessica was studying at the kitchen table and gave me a sad, embarrassed smile. "Hi," she said quietly. Are you okay?" "I am," I replied, gently touching her shoulder. "And you?" "I didn't know my mom was going to do this," she whispered, looking around to make sure Sandra wasn't listening. "I tried to talk to her, but it's not your responsibility," I reassured her. "You're not to blame for your mother's choices." During dinner, Sandra was strangely communicative. She talked about her work, made plans for the weekend, even asked about my day as if nothing had happened. "Oh, and dear," she said casually while serving dessert, "a friend of mine is coming to dinner tomorrow. Hope, you'll like her." The name was familiar, but I couldn't place where from. Hope? Yes. She's a real estate broker. A very smart, successful woman. I always say you could learn some things from her. Real estate broker. My stomach tightened. Sandra was planning something. That night, I did an online search about Hope. I found her professional website and was surprised. She wasn't just an ordinary broker. She specialized in high-value properties and had an impressive sales record. But what caught my attention most was a section of the website dedicated to real estate dispute consulting. Hope also worked as an expert in judicial evaluations and consultant in contested property cases. Sandra wasn't just bringing a friend to dinner. She was bringing ammunition for her legal war. The next day, I left work early, determined to be present during dinner. When I arrived, Hope was already there. She was a woman of about 50 years, well-dressed, with an air of authority that filled the room. "You must be the famous stepdaughter," she said when we were introduced, shaking my hand firmly. "Sandra has told me a lot about you." "I imagine so," I replied, maintaining a polite smile. During dinner, Hope dominated the conversation. She talked about the real estate market, about properties she had sold, about interesting legal cases she had followed. "It's incredible how people get attached to properties," she commented, cutting the fish with surgical precision. "Sometimes for purely emotional reasons, without considering practical realities." "And what would those practical realities be?" I asked. "Well, a house like this, for example," she gestured around, "requires constant maintenance, high taxes, responsibilities that not always a young person is prepared to assume. Young people can learn," I countered. Of course," Hope agreed with a condescending smile. "But sometimes it's wiser to let people with more experience assume those responsibilities." The conversation continued in this tone throughout the meal. Hope made apparently innocent comments about the costs of maintaining a large property, about young people who went into debt trying to maintain houses beyond their means, about the wisdom of accepting fair offers when they appeared. It was sophisticated psychological torture, disguised as polite conversation. After dinner, when Hope was preparing to leave, she approached me. "Can I give you some advice?" she said, lowering her voice. From woman to woman. "Sure," I replied, curious to see how far she would go. Sometimes fighting for what we think is ours can cost more than it's worth. Legal processes are expensive, time-consuming, exhausting, and they don't always end as we expect. "Thank you for the advice," I said. "But some things are worth fighting for." Hope smiled. "Sandra told me you were determined. I hope your determination is based on reality, not illusions." After she left, Sandra approached me in the kitchen. "Did you like Hope?" "Interesting," I replied neutrally. "She knows a lot about properties, about rights. If you want, I can ask her to take a look at your situation. Maybe she can help you better understand your options." It was an invitation for me to allow Sandra's own expert to evaluate my situation. A bold but transparent move. "Thank you, but I already have a lawyer," I said. Of course, I just wanted to help. But I knew that helping was the last thing Sandra wanted to do. Hope's presence had been a show of force, a way to show me that Sandra had resources and contacts that I didn't have. That night, I called Dr. Miranda and told her about the dinner. "They're trying to intimidate you," she said. "It's a common tactic in real estate disputes. Show that they have resources, contacts, expertise. What if they really have arguments I don't know about? They don't. The law is clear about inheritance. What they have are resources to drag out the process and make it more expensive and exhausting for you. So what do? We stay firm, and we start investigating Sandra's claims more deeply. If she says she made significant improvements, we'll demand proof. If she claims common law marriage that would give her rights, we'll contest based on legislation. I hung up feeling a little more confident. Sandra might have resources and contacts, but I had something she didn't have. The truth. And sometimes that was enough. But sometimes it wasn't. 3 weeks after dinner with Hope, I received an unexpected call at work. It was Jessica, and her voice was loaded with urgency. "Can I meet you at lunch? It's important." "Sure. Where do you want to meet?" "At the square near your work. I need to tell you some things." When I arrived at the square, I found Jessica sitting on a bench, looking nervous and constantly looking around as if she feared being seen. "What happened?" I asked, sitting beside her. "It's about my mom," she began, her voice trembling. "And about the lawsuit." "Jessica, you don't need to get involved in this. I know it's difficult for you." "No, you don't understand," she interrupted me. "I need to get involved because I saw things that you need to know." My heart raced. "What kind of things?" Jessica took a deep breath before continuing. "My mom, she's not who you think she is. Or rather, she's exactly who you think she is, but worse." "How so?" "She has other properties," Jessica said quickly, as if the words burned her mouth. "At least 3 that I know of. An apartment downtown, a beach house, and a small farm on the outskirts of the city." I was silent, processing the information. "How do you know this?" "Because I help her with the bookkeeping of her craft business sometimes. And because I found the documents." Jessica took a folder from her bag. "She doesn't know I made copies, but I couldn't stay quiet watching her do this to you." I opened the folder and found copies of deeds, bank statements, and other documents. It was true. Sandra had considerable wealth that she had hidden from all of us. "Why did she hide this?" I asked. "Because she wanted you all to think she depended on your father, that she had nowhere to go if she was kicked out of the house. It's all part of her plan." "What plan?" Jessica hesitated, then continued. "She always wanted this house. From the first day she set foot here. She researched about your mother, about the will, about you. She knew exactly what she was getting into when she married your father." I felt a chill down my spine. "She planned all this?" "Not from the beginning," Jessica admitted. "At first, I think she really liked your father, but when she saw the house, when she understood the value of the property, things changed." "And your father? Does he know about these other properties?" "No. She keeps everything separate. Says it's to protect the family's patrimony, in case something happens with the business." I looked at the documents again. The acquisition dates were revealing. Sandra had bought 2 of the properties after marrying Dad, using money she allegedly didn't have. "Jessica," I said, "why are you telling me this? She's your mother." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Because I care about you. Because what she's doing is wrong. And because—" She stopped, wiping her eyes. "Because I'm tired of pretending I don't see who she really is. This will bring you trouble. I know. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after seeing her trying to throw away your mother's things." That was disgusting." I put the documents in the folder and hugged her. "Thank you. You can't imagine how much this means to me." "There's one more thing," Jessica said when we separated. "About the lawsuit." "What about it?" "She's paying the lawyer with money from one of the properties she sold recently. Not with money she and your father have together. And she told me she has a plan B in case she loses the lawsuit." "What kind of plan B?" "She's going to offer one of the other properties to your father in exchange for his cooperation in the lawsuit. A beach house worth about $300,000. Now I understood. Sandra wasn't just fighting for my house. She was willing to bribe my own father to get what she wanted. "Jessica, do you have proof of this?" "I have some conversations recorded on my phone. I started recording when I realized things were getting serious. For self-protection, you understand?" I was impressed with the girl's maturity and courage. At 19 years old, she was risking her relationship with her mother to do what was right. "Will you be safe? If your mother finds out." "I've already thought about that," Jessica said. "Amanda and I were planning to leave home anyway, regardless of all this. We're both 19 and 16 now. We can manage. And if you need anything—" "Thank you." She smiled for the first time since we started talking. "But we'll be fine. The question is, are you going to use this information?" I looked at the folder in my hands. It was exactly the kind of evidence that could completely change the course of the lawsuit. Sandra had lied about her financial situation, hidden assets, and was planning to bribe a key witness. "I'll take it to my lawyer," I said. "She'll know what to do with this." When we got home that afternoon, the atmosphere was tense. Sandra was in the kitchen, but wasn't humming like in recent days. Dad was in the living room, looking disturbed. "Where were you?" Sandra asked when Jessica entered. "I met a friend for lunch," Jessica replied calmly. Sandra studied her for a moment, then returned to what she was doing. But I noticed she was suspicious. That night, I called Dr. Miranda and scheduled an urgent meeting for the next day. When I told her about the documents and recordings, she was visibly excited. "This changes everything," she said. will use this information to completely dismantle her argument. If she hid assets and lied about her financial situation, she might even face criminal charges for bad faith litigation. And the plan to bribe my father? If we have proof of that, it's a crime. Bribery, coercion. We can open a range of possibilities. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt I had a real chance of winning. Sandra had completely underestimated her own daughter, and this underestimation could be her downfall. But I also knew that when Sandra discovered Jessica's betrayal, things would become much more dangerous for all of us. The war was far from over. But now, finally, I had some weapons to fight back. The hearing was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday in March. I had barely slept the night before, mentally reviewing all the arguments, all the evidence that Dr. Miranda had prepared. Jessica called me early, wishing me good luck, but her voice was tense. My mom has been strange since yesterday, she told me. I think she suspects something. Are you safe? I am. Amanda and I packed our bags last night. If things get too bad, we'll go to our aunt's house. At the courthouse, I found Sandra and her lawyer, Dr. Mitchell, a man of about 60 years with a confident expression that made me nervous. Sandra was impeccably dressed, with an expression of outraged victim that she had perfected over the months. Dad was sitting next to them, looking older and more frail than I remembered. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away. Remember? Dr. Miranda whispered to me. Let me ask the questions. If anyone tries to intimidate you, stay calm. The judge, Dr. Patricia, was a middle-aged woman with a serious but fair expression. She opened the hearing by reading the case and explaining the procedure. Dr. Mitchell spoke first, presenting Sandra as a woman who had dedicated 5 years of her life to caring for a property and a family, investing time and money in improvements, only to be cruelly expelled by a resentful stepdaughter. Your Honor, he said with a dramatic voice, my client is not asking for charity. She is claiming legitimate rights over a property that she helped build and maintain. When it was Dr. Miranda's turn, she was direct to the point. Your Honor, this case is about a flagrant attempt to usurp legitimate inheritance. The plaintiff has no rights over the property, which was left entirely to my client by valid and registered will. Then the testimonies began. Sandra was the first to speak, and her performance was impressive. She cried at the right moments, talked about the sacrifices she had made for the family, about the love she felt for the house and the people who lived in it. I treated that girl like my own daughter, she said, drying tears that seemed genuine. I cared for the house as if it were mine, because it was mine in my heart. And now she wants to kick me out as if I were a stranger. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice firm despite the nervousness. This house was left to me by my deceased mother. The plaintiff systematically tried to erase my mother's memory from this house, including attempting to discard personal objects of inestimable sentimental value. Dr. Mitchell tried to interrupt me several times, questioning my emotional capacity to administer a property of such value, but Dr. Miranda always intervened. Then came the crucial moment. Dad's testimony. He approached the microphone with hesitant steps. Sandra stared at him fixedly, as if she could control him from a distance. Mr. Robert, Dr. Mitchell began, can you tell us how long you've been in common-law marriage with Mrs. Sandra? 5 years, Dad replied quietly. And during this time, did she contribute significantly to the property's maintenance? Yes. Including renovations and improvements? Dad hesitated. Yes, some. Mr. Robert, Dr. Mitchell continued, did you sign any document transferring your rights over the property to your wife? It was then that something happened that changed everything. Dad looked at Sandra, then at me, then back at the lawyer. I signed some papers, but I never really understood what they were. Dr. Miranda stood up immediately. Your Honor, I would like to present evidence that has just become relevant. She took out a folder and handed some documents to the judge. These are copies of deeds of other properties belonging to the plaintiff, concealed throughout this process. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Sandra went pale, and Dr. Mitchell looked confused. Your Honor, Dr. Miranda continued, the plaintiff alleged need and financial dependence to justify her supposed rights over my client's property. However, as these documents demonstrate, she possesses considerable wealth that was deliberately concealed. The judge examined the papers with growing attention. Dr. Miranda, how did you obtain these documents? Through a legitimate source that will be preserved as provided by law. Dr. Mitchell, the judge addressed Sandra's lawyer, are you aware of these assets? Dr. Mitchell was visibly disturbed. No, Your Honor. My client informed me that she was financially dependent on her partner. The judge looked directly at Sandra. Mrs. Sandra, do you confirm the authenticity of these documents? Sandra tried to speak, but only a strangled sound came from her throat. Finally, she managed to say, I can explain. Explain what? The judge asked coldly. Why did you omit significant assets in an action where you claim financial dependence? It was at that moment that the courtroom door opened and Jessica entered, accompanied by Amanda. She went directly to the judge's bench. Your Honor, I am the plaintiff's daughter, and I have important information about this case. Sandra stood up abruptly. Jessica, what are you doing? What's right? Mom, Jessica replied, without looking at her. The judge allowed Jessica to testify. With a firm voice, she told about the hidden properties, about the manipulation attempts, and about the plans to bribe Dad. I have recordings on my phone, Jessica said, handing the device to the judge. My mother planned to offer a beach property to Mr. Robert in exchange for his cooperation in the lawsuit. Sandra exploded. You're my daughter! How can you do this to me? Because being your daughter doesn't oblige me to be an accomplice to your lies, Jessica replied, tears finally appearing. The judge called a recess to analyze the recordings. When we returned, her expression was severe. After analyzing the evidence presented, she began, it's clear that this action was filed in bad faith. The plaintiff concealed significant assets, lied about her financial situation, and there is evidence of attempted witness coercion. Sandra was visibly trembling. Therefore, the judge continued, I rule the reivindicatory action unfounded. Furthermore, I order the plaintiff to pay court costs and the opposing party's legal fees. And I also order that the records be sent to the public prosecutor's office for investigation of crimes of ideological falsehood and attempted coercion. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Dad had his face in his hands. Sandra stared fixedly at Jessica with an expression of pure hatred. But I felt only one thing, relief. The war was over. And I had won. When we left the courthouse, Jessica approached me. Thank you, I said, hugging her tightly. Thank you, she replied, for showing me that it's possible to do what's right, even when it's difficult. Sandra passed by us without saying a word, followed by Dr. Mitchell, who seemed to be having a tense discussion with her. Dad approached hesitantly. Daughter, he began. I'm sorry, for everything. I looked at him for a long moment. I saw genuine regret in his eyes. But I also saw years of weakness, bad choices, distorted priorities. I know you're sorry, Dad, I said finally. But being sorry doesn't undo what was done. Can you forgive me? It was a simple question, but with a complicated answer. Could I forgive the man who had chosen a manipulator over my mother's memory? Who had tried to convince me to give up the only thing she had left me? I can forgive, I said finally. But I can't forget. And I can't pretend that nothing has changed between us. Dad nodded sadly. I understand. When we got home, my house, a few hours later, we found Sandra packing frantically. She didn't even look at any of us. Jessica and Amanda already had their things ready. We're going to stay with our aunt for now, Jessica explained to me, until we decide what to do. You can stay here as long as you need, I offered. Thank you, but I think it's better this way. At least until things calm down. Sandra finished packing and headed for the door. For the first time in days, she looked directly at me. You think you won? She said, her voice loaded with venom. But you don't know what you lost. I know exactly what I lost, I replied calmly. I lost a manipulator, a liar, and a woman who tried to erase my mother's memory, and I'm happy with that loss. Sandra left, slamming the door. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I had dinner alone in my own house. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was liberating. I went to Mom's room and sat in the armchair where she used to read. I picked up one of the diaries that Sandra had tried to throw away and opened it to a random page. My dear daughter will need to be strong one day, was written in Mom's delicate handwriting. The world will try to take from her what is rightfully hers, but I trust that she will know how to fight when necessary. I closed the diary and smiled through tears. I fought, Mom, I whispered, and I won. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first ray of sun in weeks was beginning to appear between the clouds. The storm had passed. It was time to rebuild. 3 months after the hearing, my life had taken a completely new direction. Sandra was indicted for ideological falsehood and attempted coercion, receiving a sentence of 2 years in prison and a heavy fine. Her craft business collapsed when the news spread, and she had to sell one of her properties to pay legal debts. Dad tried to approach me several times, but the conversations were always tense and awkward. The trust that existed between us had been broken, and we both knew it might never be fully restored. He ended up losing his job when the story reached his colleagues' ears. Working at an accounting firm and being involved in a fraud scandal didn't go well together. Jessica and Amanda moved to a small apartment they shared while studying. Jessica got a scholarship and was graduating in business administration, while Amanda had finished high school with excellent grades. They visited me regularly, and our friendship strengthened far beyond the family ties that once united us. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if my mom had been different, Jessica told me during one of her visits. If she had simply tried to be part of the family for real, instead of trying to control everything. Maybe she didn't know how to do it differently, I replied. Some people only know how to relate through control. Aren't you angry at her? It was a question I had asked myself many times. I was angry, yes. Very angry. But anger is like poison that we take hoping the other person dies. At some point, you have to decide to stop poisoning yourself. On Dr. Miranda's recommendation, I filed a civil action against Sandra and Dad for moral damages. The process was relatively quick, considering all the evidence already gathered. I received compensation of 50,000 Rs, which I used to completely renovate the house, not to erase Mom's memories, but to honor them properly. I transformed Sandra's former studio back into Mom's room, but now as a proper memorial. Her paintings were framed and hung on the walls, her diaries were organized on a special shelf, and her jewelry was displayed in a showcase that Dad had given her as a gift years ago. I changed all the house locks and installed a new security system, this time one that only I controlled. I obtained a restraining order against Sandra and Dad, prohibiting them from approaching the property. At work, Mrs. Elena promoted me to financial supervisor when she learned about the whole situation. Anyone who can manage a legal battle of this level can manage anything, she said. But the most significant change in my life came in an unexpected way. During one of the house renovations, I met David, an architect who was supervising some structural changes. He was kind, respectful, and completely understood my need to preserve the essence of the house my mother had loved. "This house has a soul," he told me one day, looking at the gardens I had restored exactly as Mom had left them. "You can feel the love that was put here." Our friendship slowly evolved into something deeper. David never tried to change anything in the house or question my choices. On the contrary, he helped make each space more functional while preserving its history. 2 years after the hearing, we got married in a small ceremony in the house garden. Jessica was my maid of honor, and Amanda did the reading of the vows. It was exactly the kind of celebration Mom would have loved. Simple, full of love, and centered on what really mattered. On the wedding day, I found a letter from Mom that had been hidden in a secret drawer of her desk, a drawer I only discovered during the renovations. "My dear daughter," the letter said, "if you're reading this, it means you had to fight for this house. It means you understood why I left it to you. This house isn't just bricks and cement. It's proof that you're strong enough to protect what's yours, what's right, what's just. Use this strength to build a life full of true love, not the kind that tries to control or manipulate, but the kind that liberates and supports. You deserve to be happy, and you deserve to be loved exactly as you are." I cried reading that letter, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. A few months after the wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. David and I decided that the baby would grow up in this house, hearing stories about the grandmother she would never meet, but whose love still filled every room. One day, when I was organizing the room that would be the baby's, I received an unexpected call. It was Jessica. "Did you see the news?" she asked. "No, why?" "My mom. She was arrested again." Sandra had tried to apply the same scheme to another family, this time targeting a widower with 2 adult daughters. But this time, the daughters were prepared. They had researched Sandra's past and discovered her previous conviction. When she tried to repeat her tactics, they immediately reported her. "I guess she'll never learn," Jessica said, her voice loaded with sadness. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But at least now she can't hurt anyone else. Do you think I should visit her in prison?" It was a difficult question. Jessica had been brave in standing up against her mother, but she was still her mother. "Do what your heart tells you," I said. "But remember, you're not responsible for her choices, nor obligated to suffer their consequences." Dad had also tried to contact me several times over the years. His phone calls were always awkward, full of apologies and requests for forgiveness that came too late. His health had deteriorated significantly. The pressure of everything that had happened, combined with guilt and isolation, had taken its toll. The last time we talked, he told me, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I regret every day not protecting your mother's memory." "Not protecting you." "I know, Dad," I replied, "and I've already forgiven you. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean things can go back to how they were before." Now, 3 years after the hearing, as I rock my daughter Sophia, yes, I gave her my mother's name, in the garden my mother planted, I reflect on everything that happened. Sandra is serving her second prison sentence. Dad lives alone in a small apartment, his health fragile and few friends. Jessica became a successful administrator, and Amanda is in university studying law. "Inspired by your courage," as she told me. And me? I built a life my mother dreamed for me. A life based on true love, not manipulation. A life where I'm respected, not controlled. A life where the house she left me truly became a home. Sometimes when I'm sitting in Mom's armchair with Sophia in my lap, I feel her presence clearly. It's as if she's whispering, "You did well, my daughter. You understood." And I really did understand. I understood that some battles need to be fought, not for revenge, but for dignity. I understood that forgiving doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. I understood that protecting what's ours isn't selfishness. It's self-love. Sandra thought she could break me, manipulate me, force me to give up what was rightfully mine. She completely underestimated the strength my mother had planted in me, the determination that had been cultivated through years of unconditional love. In the end, Sandra lost everything: her freedom, her reputation, her wealth, and even the family she claimed to be protecting. Dad lost his daughter, his wife, his job, and his dignity. Both paid a high price for their choices. But me? I gained much more than a house. I gained the certainty that I can defend myself, that I can fight for what's right, that I can honor the people I love without diminishing myself in the process. Today, when I look at Sophia sleeping in my arms, I promise her and my mother's memory that I will never let anyone try to control our life, invade our space, or disrespect our history. This house is ours. This life is ours. And this time, I know exactly how to protect them. The inheritance my mother left me wasn't just a property. It was a lesson about strength, dignity, and self-love. And now I'm passing this inheritance on to my daughter. The cycle continues, but this time with wisdom, protection, and lots of love. Sophia opened her little eyes and looked at me as if she understood everything. I smiled at her and whispered, "You're home, my love, and you always will be. Because some things once conquered the right way can never be taken from us again. And this house, our house, is one of them."